Hi, welcome to the Silent Avenger channel. If you're enjoying the content, please consider giving it a like and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive into today's story. My name is Nick. I'm 43, married, well, sort of, to Lauren for 20 years. We have a 17-year-old son, Jake. If you had asked me a month ago, I would have told you we had a solid marriage. Not perfect, but built on trust. Or so I thought. Everything changed one morning. Lauren sat me down at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, and hit me with the words no husband wants to hear. I need some space. She wouldn't look me in the eye when she said it. Just kept stirring her coffee like she was talking about the weather. I laughed. At first, I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. Lauren and I weren't the type of couple that needed space. We did everything together. We had always done everything together. But she was dead serious. She said she wanted to move out for a while, clear her head, figure out what she wanted. Where would you even go? I asked. Clara's. And that was when I knew something was wrong. Let me tell you about Clara. She's Lauren's best friend, but I've never liked her. She's the type of woman who loves drama, always stirring the pot. Been married 3 times, cheats on every guy she's with, and treats relationships like disposable napkins. You know the type. So yeah, Lauren moving in with her? That sent alarms blaring in my head. I kept calm though. I asked Lauren straight up if there was someone else. She looked offended. Offended. Said, "Of course not, Nick. This is about me. I just need time to think." Fine. You wanna think? Think. But so will I. I helped her pack her bags that very afternoon. Kissed her on the cheek. Watched her walk out the door, thinking to myself, if you're lying to me, Lauren, I'll find out. That night, I hired a private investigator. The first night without Lauren felt surreal. I sat in our quiet house, staring at the empty spot on the couch where she usually curled up with a blanket. Jake was in his room, probably playing video games, pretending like nothing had changed. Maybe he didn't understand yet. Or maybe he just didn't want to. I wanted to believe Lauren. I really did. But the second she mentioned Clara, I knew I had to take action. The private investigator, Mark, was a no-nonsense guy. Came highly recommended by a friend who went through a messy divorce. We met the next morning at a diner. Just 2 guys drinking coffee like this was any other Tuesday. "So what are we looking for?" he asked, pulling out a notepad. "I need to know if she's cheating." He nodded like he'd heard it 1,000 times before. "Where is she staying?" "Her friend Clara's place. At least, that's what she told me." Mark smirked. "Let's find out." He started that night, watching, tracking, digging. Meanwhile, I wasn't just sitting around waiting. I called my lawyer. Not to file for divorce yet, but to prepare. "If she's cheating, we move fast," I told him. The next few days were a waiting game. Lauren acted normal, texting Jake, sending me a few check-ins like, "Hope you and Jake are eating well." I kept my responses short. I wasn't playing along with this charade. Then, 3 nights in, Mark called me. "Nick, you're gonna want to hear this." I gripped my phone tighter. "She's not at Clara's." I felt my stomach drop. "Where is she?" "Hotel. Booked under her name. And she's not alone." I closed my eyes, breathing through the gut punch. I had been hoping, stupidly, that I was wrong. That maybe this was really just about space. But no. "Who's the guy?" I asked, already feeling the anger bubbling. "Still working on that. But I'll have photos by tomorrow." I barely slept that night. My mind ran through every memory of my marriage, every moment that now seemed like a lie. The way she smiled at me last week. The way she kissed me before leaving for work. Had she already checked out? Had she already been with him? By morning, I knew one thing for sure. Lauren thought she had time. Thought she had control. She had no idea what was coming. By the next afternoon, Mark had everything. He sent me a folder full of photos, each one worse than the last. Lauren wasn't just meeting some guy for drinks. She was with him, laughing, touching, kissing in the hotel lobby before disappearing upstairs. The timestamps told the whole story. She had spent the night there. And the guy? Ryan. I didn't recognize him at first. Just some younger-looking dude, fit, well-dressed. But Mark did some digging. Ryan was married, some corporate guy with a wife and 2 kids. That little detail hit me like a sledgehammer. Not only was my wife betraying me, but she was doing it with someone who had just as much to lose. That same night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at those photos, my hands shaking from rage. I had the proof. She couldn't gaslight her way out of this. Jake walked in, grabbing a snack from the fridge. "Dad," he said, glancing at me. "You good?" I forced myself to nod. "Yeah, bud. Just thinking." I wasn't ready to tell him yet. He deserved better than to find out his mother was a liar and a cheat from a few pieces of paper. I sent Lauren a text. "Hey, we need to talk. Come by tomorrow evening." She replied almost immediately. "Lauren, of course. Everything okay?" I didn't answer. Let her wonder. The next evening, she walked through the door like nothing had changed. Like she was still my wife. She smiled, acting casual, setting her purse down on the counter. "You look serious," she said, tilting her head. "What's going on?" I slid the folder across the table. "Open it." She hesitated. For a split second, I swear I saw fear flicker in her eyes. Then she picked it up, flipping through the pages. The color drained from her face. "Nick, don't. Just don't." She shut her mouth, swallowing hard. "How long?" I asked, voice low. She stared at the photos like she could make them disappear. "It's not what you think," she whispered. I laughed. Actually laughed. "Really? Because it looks like you spent the night in a hotel with Ryan." Her mouth opened, closed. She looked panicked, like a cornered animal. I was confused. I didn't plan for this to happen. "Lauren, stop lying." She flinched. "I have proof. I have a private investigator. I know everything." Tears welled up in her eyes. Fake ones. "I never meant to hurt you," she choked out. I lost myself, Nick. I needed to feel wanted again." "You needed to feel wanted?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "After 20 years of marriage? After building a life together? After raising a son?" She covered her face, sobbing. But I didn't care. "You could have come to me," I said, gripping the edge of the table. "You could have talked to me instead of running off to some other man." Lauren shook her head, crying harder. I was scared. I thought maybe we lost our spark. Clara kept telling me I deserved to be happy, that I needed to see what was out there. I slammed my fist on the table. "Clara? You let Clara, the serial cheater, talk you into destroying our marriage." She jumped at my outburst. "Good. Nick, please. I love you. I made a mistake." "No," I said, standing up. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up milk. This was a choice. And now you get to live with it." I pulled out the separation papers and placed them in front of her. "Sign them." Her breath hitched. "Wait, what?" "Nick, no. We can fix this." I shook my head. "If you sign them now, we keep this clean. If you don't, I file for divorce instead. And trust me, Lauren, the court won't look kindly on a cheating wife." She sobbed harder, her hands shaking. "Nick, please think about Jake." "Oh, don't you dare bring him into this," I snapped. "You weren't thinking about him when you were sleeping with another man." She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. I didn't care. I had spent 20 years loving this woman, believing in her. And in one selfish act, she burned it all to the ground. Lauren just sat there, staring at the separation papers, her hands trembling. She looked like she was in shock, like she actually thought she could cry her way out of this. "Nick," she whispered. "Please just give me a chance to explain." I folded my arms. "Explain what, Lauren? That it just happened? That you were confused?" I shook my head. "There's nothing to explain. You made your choice." She wiped her eyes, struggling to keep herself together. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said. "But it did happen." I could see her gears turning, trying to figure out a way to spin this, to soften the blow, to make herself the victim. "Nick, I wasn't happy," she finally admitted. I let out a short, bitter laugh. "So your solution was to cheat?" "I felt lost," she said, looking down. "Clara kept telling me I needed to live for myself. That I had spent my whole life being a wife and a mother, and I didn't even know who I was anymore. There it was. The real reason. Clara. That miserable home-wrecking woman had been in her ear the whole time, feeding her garbage, convincing her that our marriage was something she needed to escape from. So what now? I asked, nodding at the papers. She hesitated. I can't sign these yet. I exhaled slowly, my patience running thin. Lauren, this is happening whether you like it or not. If you don't sign them, I'll just file for divorce instead. And when the court sees proof of your infidelity, you'll lose any chance at sympathy. Her lip quivered. You're really just throwing away 20 years like that? That set me off. I'm not throwing away anything, Lauren. You did that when you decided to sneak around behind my back. When you booked that hotel room. When you let Ryan, a married man, into your bed. She flinched like I had slapped her. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she tried again. But it did, I shot back. The room fell silent. Then, she tried one last card. What about Jake? She said softly. What are we going to tell him? I stared at her, barely able to contain my disgust. Oh, now you care about Jake. I said. Where was that concern when you were sneaking around? Where was that concern when you were meeting Ryan in hotel rooms? Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't care anymore. I'm not going to lie to him, I continued. I'll tell him the truth. That his mother didn't love his father enough to stay faithful. She covered her mouth, letting out a broken sob. Nick, please. I stood up, leaning over the table. You think crying is going to fix this? You think I'll just pretend this didn't happen? I pointed at the papers. You have until the end of the week. If you don't sign them, I go straight to my lawyer. She just sat there, staring at the papers, her body trembling. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out, leaving her sitting at the kitchen table, alone, broken, and exactly where she put herself. The weight of it all hit me the second I walked out of that room. 20 years of marriage, trust, and love gone. And now, I had to do the one thing I had been dreading most. I had to tell Jake. He was in his room gaming, like always. When I knocked, he barely looked up. What's up? He asked, still focused on his screen. I hesitated. How do you even start a conversation like this? Can you pause that for a second? That got his attention. I never asked him to pause. He set his controller down and turned to face me. What's wrong? I sat on the edge of his bed, taking a deep breath. Listen, son, there's something you need to know. His face immediately tensed. Is it Mom? He asked. I nodded. She cheated, I said, no sugarcoating. His whole body stiffened. He blinked at me, like he was waiting for me to say I was joking. No way, he said. Mom wouldn't do that. I sighed, running a hand over my face. I wish that were true. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to one of the photos Mark had sent me, and handed it to him. Jake stared at it. A full 10 seconds of silence. Then, he let out a shaky breath and threw my phone across the room. It hit the wall with a loud crack. Are you kidding me? I let him have his moment. He was furious, his face red, his hands clenched into fists. She lied to us? To me, he shouted. For what? Some random guy. Not just some guy, I said, voice tight. He's married too. That pushed him over the edge. He punched his dresser, not hard enough to break anything, but enough to make a loud bang. God, she's so, he stopped himself, pacing the room. I don't even want to see her. That hit me in the gut. As much as I was furious with Lauren, she was still his mother. I didn't want to poison their relationship, but I also wasn't going to protect her from the consequences of her own actions. She wants to talk to you, I told him. Yeah? Well, I don't want to talk to her. I nodded. That's your choice. I won't force you. He just shook his head, running his hands through his hair. I trusted her, he muttered. And she threw it all away. For what? Some loser. I had no answer. For the next few minutes, we just sat there in silence. Then finally, Jake took a deep breath. What happens now? He asked. She's signing the separation papers, I said. If she doesn't, I'm filing for divorce. He nodded slowly. Good. That was it. That was all he said. He picked up his controller and unpaused his game, but I could tell he wasn't really playing. His mind was somewhere else. Lauren had shattered more than just our marriage. She had shattered her son's trust. And I didn't think she'd ever get it back. Lauren didn't sign the papers by the end of the week. I wasn't surprised. She called. She texted. She even showed up at the house once, but I didn't let her in. Every message was the same. Nick, please, let's talk. Nick, we can fix this. Nick, don't do this to us. Us? There was no us anymore. I gave her one final warning. Sign the papers, or I file for divorce first thing Monday morning. She didn't respond. So on Monday morning, I drove to my lawyer's office, handed over the evidence, and started the divorce process. That same afternoon, Lauren came to the house again. I was outside, checking the mail, when I saw her car pull up. She got out quickly, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was a mess, and her makeup was barely holding together. Nick, please, she begged. Don't do this. I stood there, arms crossed. It's done, Lauren. I filed this morning. She froze. I could see the panic flash across her face. You filed? Just like that. Just like that. She swallowed hard, stepping closer. Nick, I swear, I wasn't thinking clearly. Clara kept pushing me to go out, to have fun, to feel young again. And I got caught up in it. I scoffed. So it's Clara's fault now? She opened her mouth, then shut it. It was a mistake, she whispered. A stupid, reckless mistake. But it didn't mean anything. Didn't mean anything? I repeated, shaking my head. Lauren, you don't wreck your family for something that doesn't mean anything. You don't sneak off to hotels, lie to your husband, and sleep with a married man if it doesn't mean anything. That wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. She started crying, loud, ugly sobs. Nick, I love you. I laughed. A bitter, humorless laugh. No, you don't, I said. You love what I gave you. Stability. Loyalty. A family. But me? You threw me away like I was nothing. She shook her head frantically. No, I didn't mean to. Please, we can fix this. I took a step back. I don't want to fix it, Lauren. I don't want you. And for the first time, I saw it sink in. Her whole body sagged, like the weight of her choices had finally crushed her. What about Jake? She choked out. I sighed. He knows. And right now, he doesn't want to see you. That broke her. She collapsed onto the porch steps, sobbing into her hands. But I didn't comfort her. She did this. She wanted freedom, wanted to feel young again. Well, now she had it. And it cost her everything. After that day on the porch, Lauren finally stopped showing up unannounced. Maybe it was Jake refusing to talk to her. Maybe it was realizing that I wasn't budging. Either way, reality was hitting her, and it wasn't pretty. But she wasn't done begging yet. She started calling my sister, Rachel, trying to get her on her side. Rachel, please, you know me. I'm not a bad person. I just made a mistake. Rachel shut that down fast. Lauren, you didn't just make a mistake. You made a series of disgusting choices. And now, you don't like the consequences. Lauren cried, saying she felt like everyone was turning against her. Because they are, Rachel told her. Nobody respects a cheater, Lauren. And you did this to Nick. To Jake. You don't get to play the victim now. Rachel told me all of this later, shaking her head in disgust. I used to love her like a sister, she admitted. But now? I can't even stand hearing her voice. And she wasn't the only one cutting Lauren off. My parents? Furious. Her own parents? Disappointed. They weren't angry, not like my family, but they weren't defending her either. When she tried to cry to her mother about how Nick won't even give me a chance, her mom just sighed and said, "Can you really blame him?" Lauren's world, her safety net, was collapsing around her. And the worst was yet to come. I don't know how exactly Ryan's wife Melissa found out, but when she did, all hell broke loose. Lauren called me one night, hysterical. Nick, please, you have to talk to Melissa. She's threatening to destroy my life. I blinked. Her life? Lauren, what exactly do you think I'm going to do? Take your side? Defend you? She's telling everyone. My coworkers, my friends, even my boss. She sent screenshots of the hotel bookings, the texts, everything. I didn't even bother hiding my amusement. So what you're saying is, Melissa is doing what you were hoping I wouldn't do. Nick, please, she sobbed. You have to stop her. No, I really don't. And I hung up. Because, honestly? Good for Melissa. Lauren wanted to lie, cheat, and sneak around? Now she got to deal with the fallout. Not even 2 days later, Ryan's wife kicked him out. Melissa wasted no time. She froze their joint accounts, called his job, where they prided themselves on family values, and let them know exactly what kind of man he was. Ryan got fired before the week was over. And Lauren? She got dragged through the mud. Clara and all her little friends, the ones who pushed Lauren into this mess, were suddenly nowhere to be found. They stopped inviting her out, stopped returning her texts. Even they didn't want to be associated with her now. Her own boss caught wind of the scandal and called her in for a private discussion. The next time I heard from Lauren, she had lost her job. She tried to spin it like it was unfair, like she was the victim. But at the end of the day, she did this to herself. Lauren stopped calling after that. Maybe it was pride. Maybe she finally realized there was nothing left to say. Either way, the silence was a relief. But just because she wasn't reaching out didn't mean I wasn't hearing about her. Word spread fast. People whispered. Friends she had known for years started keeping their distance. Not because I told them to, because they didn't respect her anymore. Jake still refused to see her. She texted him constantly, begging to meet, asking if they could talk, but he either ignored her or gave her short, cold responses. Not interested. Busy. Maybe later. There was never a later. I didn't push him. This was his decision to make, and honestly, I didn't blame him. She had betrayed our family, and Jake saw it for what it was. Meanwhile, Ryan's life was imploding. I heard from a mutual friend that he was staying in some cheap motel, cut off from his kids, fighting with Melissa over everything. She wasn't just divorcing him, she was out for blood. Spousal support? Gone. Custody? Not a chance. She was making sure he walked away with nothing. And Lauren? She was alone. The so-called friends who had encouraged her freedom had all vanished, leaving her to deal with the wreckage by herself. She had lost her home, her family, her reputation, and now, even her job. The life she had built for 20 years had crumbled because of one selfish decision. One night, I got a text from an unknown number. It was her. I miss you. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe a few months ago, that would have hurt. Maybe I would have thought about it, about the good times, about what we had before she destroyed it. But now, I just felt nothing. I blocked the number. Lauren wanted to throw away everything we had for some cheap, meaningless affair. And now, she had exactly what she deserved. After I blocked her number, I expected some kind of fallout, maybe another desperate attempt to get through to me, another surprise visit at the house. But nothing happened. Just silence. I figured she had finally accepted the reality she had created for herself. Jake, on the other hand, was still struggling. He acted like he was fine, throwing himself into school and hanging out with his friends, but I could see the anger simmering beneath the surface. One night, I found him in the kitchen late, just standing there, staring at his phone. He looked up when I walked in. She texted again, he muttered. I leaned against the counter. What did she say? Same thing. That she misses me. That she wants to talk. I didn't say anything. I just let him process it. After a minute, he let out a bitter laugh. She doesn't care about me, Dad. She just doesn't want to feel like a bad mother. That hurt to hear, but he wasn't wrong. You don't have to respond, I told him. He nodded, exhaling sharply. I won't. He deleted the message and put his phone away. And just like that, Lauren's last fragile connection to her son was gone. Meanwhile, my own life was starting to rebuild. I focused on work, started hitting the gym more, even went out with friends again, things I hadn't done in years. I hadn't realized just how much of my life had revolved around Lauren, how much of myself I had given to a woman who didn't even value it. And now that she was gone, I felt free. Months passed. Then a year. Then 2. The divorce was finalized, and Lauren officially became nothing more than a name on old paperwork. She moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, still trying to piece together the life she had destroyed. Every so often I'd hear about her from someone, how she was struggling, how she hadn't dated anyone serious since Ryan, how she was still alone. Then one day, I met someone new. Her name was Emily. She was kind, genuine, nothing like Lauren. We started off slow, but before I knew it, I was happy again, really happy. The kind of happiness I thought I'd never feel after what Lauren had done to me. The day I proposed to Emily, Jake was the first to celebrate. My family, my friends, they were all there, cheering me on. And for the first time in years, I realized just how far I had come. Lauren, though? She was nowhere to be seen. Because she had made her choice. And I had finally moved on. A few weeks after I proposed to Emily, Lauren showed up again. I hadn't seen her in almost a year, and when I opened my front door, I barely recognized her. She looked tired, worn down, like someone who had spent too long carrying the weight of her own bad decisions. "Hey Nick," she said softly. I didn't invite her in. I just crossed my arms and waited. "I heard about the engagement," she continued. "Congratulations." Her voice was steady, but I could tell this wasn't a friendly visit. "What do you want, Lauren?" I asked, cutting to the chase. She sighed, looking down at her hands. I wanted to see you. Talk to you. Maybe," she hesitated, then forced the words out. "Maybe see if there's any part of you that's still." "Don't," I interrupted. She flinched. "Lauren, whatever you think this is, it's not happening," I said, my voice firm. "I've moved on. I have a life now, a woman who actually respects me. There is nothing left between us." Her lip quivered, but she quickly composed herself. "I just miss how things used to be," she admitted. "I miss you. I miss our family." I let out a bitter laugh. "You miss the life you threw away," I corrected. "Not me." Her eyes welled up with tears. "I was stupid, Nick," she whispered. "I listened to the wrong people. I made choices that I can never take back. But I swear if I could go back, if I could undo it." "But you can't," I cut in. "And that's the whole problem, Lauren. You don't get to hit reset after years of lying and betrayal. You don't get to come back and act like any of this can be fixed." She wiped her eyes quickly, trying to keep herself together. "So that's it?" she asked, her voice breaking. "You don't even feel anything for me anymore?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. And for the first time, I realized the truth. "No," I said simply. "I don't." Her face crumbled. "Goodbye, Lauren." I shut the door. And this time? She didn't knock again. After I shut the door, I just stood there for a moment, listening. Waiting. Part of me expected her to knock again, to call my name, to try one last time. But she didn't. When I peeked out the window, I saw her standing by her car, her shoulders slumped, wiping at her face. She stayed there for a minute, maybe two. Then she got in and drove away. And just like that, Lauren was gone. I exhaled slowly, feeling something settle deep inside me, finality. She had made her choice years ago. And now, she finally had to live with it. Emily came home a little later, finding me in the kitchen, just staring out the window. She walked up behind me, wrapping her arms around my waist. "You okay?" she asked softly. I turned, kissing the top of her head. "Yeah," I said, surprising even myself. "I really am." Because for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about Lauren. I wasn't thinking about the betrayal, or the pain, or the anger. I was thinking about my future. A future without her. And for the first time, that felt like freedom. Life moved forward, with or without Lauren. The wedding was set for early summer, nothing extravagant, just family and real friends, the people who had been there through everything. Jake was my best man, and if I'm being honest, watching him step into that role made me prouder than I could ever put into words. He had come out of everything stronger, wiser, and with a zero-tolerance policy for bull. Well, you get the idea. Lauren wasn't invited, obviously. But I knew she was watching from the sidelines, whether she admitted it or not. She had unblocked me on social media months ago. I never returned the favor, but people talk. I heard she still asked about me, still wanted to know how I was doing, who I was with, whether I was happy. Like any of that mattered now. Then, a week before the wedding, Emily got a message. From Lauren. "I just wanted to say that I hope you take care of him." That was it. No long apology, no last-ditch effort to get between us, just that one pathetic attempt to insert herself into something she no longer belonged to. Emily showed me the message, waiting to see if I had any kind of reaction. I didn't. I just shook my head. "She's still trying to hold on," I said. "But there's nothing left." Emily shrugged and blocked her. That was it. No drama, no second thoughts. Just gone. And then the wedding day came. I stood at the altar, watching Emily walk toward me, and for the first time in forever, I wasn't haunted by my past. No bitterness, no anger, no ghosts of what once was. Just peace. After the ceremony, while we were taking photos, Rachel leaned in, smirking. "You know Lauren's probably crying in her apartment right now, right?" I smiled, adjusting my tie. Not my problem. And it wasn't. Not anymore. Married life with Emily felt effortless. No tension, no second-guessing, no paranoia about whether the woman beside me would betray me the second she got bored. Just peace. And after everything I'd been through, I knew better than to take that for granted. Jake had started college by then, thriving in ways I wasn't sure he ever would after everything with Lauren. He rarely spoke about her, and when he did, it was in the same way you talk about an old neighbor who moved away years ago, distant, emotionless, indifferent. But Lauren? She still tried. She'd text him every once in a while, mostly around the holidays or his birthday. Always something simple, "Thinking of you. Miss you, buddy. Hope you're doing well." But his responses were short. Polite, but detached. Gone were the days when she was the center of his world, the parent he confided in. She had burned that bridge, and she knew it. One night, after Jake visited for dinner, we were sitting on the back porch when he casually said, "Mom asked if I wanted to get lunch with her this weekend." I raised an eyebrow. And he shrugged. "I told her I was busy. Which I am. She doesn't stop trying, does she?" I said, taking a sip of my beer. Jake smirked. "Nope. But I don't stop saying no either." That was when I knew he was done with her. Lauren still had her apartment, still lived alone, still had no real friends left. She had tried dating again, but nothing ever lasted. Nobody wanted to commit to a woman whose past came with so many regrets. And maybe that was the saddest part. She had done all of this to chase freedom, to feel young again. But all she had really done was trade a loyal husband, a strong family, and a life people envied for emptiness. One day, I ran into an old friend, someone who had known both me and Lauren for years. We talked for a while, catching up, and just as I was about to leave, she hesitated and said, "I saw Lauren the other day. She asked about you." I didn't react. "She seemed lost," she continued. "She doesn't really talk to many people anymore. I think she regrets it, Nick. All of it." I thought about that for a second. About what it must be like for Lauren to sit alone in her apartment, staring at a life that used to be hers but was now mine without her. About how she used to be the one I shared my nights with, the one Jake looked up to, the one people respected. And now? She was just someone I used to know. I never missed her. Never wished things had gone differently. If anything, I pitied her. Because while she had to live every day knowing she had destroyed everything good in her life, I had done the opposite. I had rebuilt. And I had won. Life moved on, but for Lauren, it seemed to stand still. I didn't think about her much anymore. Every now and then, someone would mention her in passing, or I'd hear her name in conversation, but it was just background noise. Nothing that mattered. Nothing that affected me. But she was still stuck in the past. I knew because people kept telling me. Friends, old coworkers, even mutual acquaintances I hadn't spoken to in years. They'd run into her somewhere, a grocery store, a cafe, the parking lot of her apartment building, and every time, it was the same story. She looked miserable. She asked about you. She tried to act like she was fine, but you could tell she wasn't. At first, I didn't care. It wasn't my problem. She made her bed. She had to lie in it. But then I heard something that caught my attention. Rachel called me one evening after running into Lauren at a small bookstore downtown. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "Nick, I don't think she's doing too well." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "I mean, she looks like someone who's given up." She was alone, sitting in the corner with a coffee, just staring at the same page of a book for at least 15 minutes. I was watching. She wasn't reading. She was just sitting there. "And Nick." She paused. "She looks old. Not just physically. Just tired. Worn down. Like life chewed her up and spit her out." I exhaled slowly, gripping the phone tighter. "I don't know what you want me to say, Ratch." "I don't either," she admitted. "I just thought you should know." I sat with that for a long time. And later that night, as I lay in bed beside Emily, I found myself staring at the ceiling, thinking about what it must be like to be Lauren. To wake up every morning and realize that the best parts of your life were gone. That the man you betrayed had moved on and built something better without you. That your own son, the child you raised, loved, cared for, barely even considered you family anymore. That every choice you made to find yourself only led to losing everything. I knew it was eating her alive. And the worst part? She had no one to blame but herself. Jake still wouldn't see her. He didn't hate her, not anymore. Hate required energy, and he had long since stopped wasting any on her. But when I asked if he had any plans to meet with her, he just shook his head. "There's nothing left to say," he said simply. And he was right. Months passed, then another year. My life kept moving forward. Emily and I talked about having a baby. Jake was excelling in college. My world kept expanding, growing, thriving. Lauren, though? She was still exactly where she had left herself, alone. One night, out of pure curiosity, I asked Rachel, if Lauren had the chance to go back and undo everything, do you think she would? Rachel didn't hesitate. Absolutely. But life doesn't give you do-overs. Lauren was stuck with the one thing she could never escape: regret. Years passed, and life kept moving forward, without Lauren. Jake graduated college with honors. When he walked across that stage, standing tall and proud, I felt something deep in my chest: pride, relief, gratitude. He had made it, despite everything. Despite the betrayal, the broken home, the mother who threw away the stability he had once known. The night before his graduation, Lauren sent him a long text. A desperate, emotional plea to see him. "Jake, I know you don't want to hear from me, but please, let me be there tomorrow. I've missed so much. I just want to see you, even if it's from a distance. I love you. I always have." He showed it to me without a word. Then, before I could even ask, he deleted it. "You sure?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, slipping his phone back into his pocket. "I don't need her there." And that was it. She didn't come. She knew better than to try. Maybe she sat at home, staring at her phone, waiting for some kind of invitation that would never come. Maybe she cried herself to sleep that night, knowing her own son had written her out of his life. I wouldn't know. I didn't ask. I didn't care. Jake thrived, and Emily and I built a beautiful life together. We traveled, had date nights, made memories that meant something. She never made me feel like I was just a phase she would eventually get bored of. There were no secrets, no hidden doubts, no wondering if I was enough. Then one morning, Emily told me she was pregnant. I was going to be a father again. That moment, standing in our kitchen, holding her hands, watching her eyes light up as she said the words, that was happiness. Not the shallow, fleeting kind that Lauren had chased when she threw everything away. No, this was real. This was something built, earned, cherished. Months later, when I held our daughter for the first time, something inside me clicked. This was the life I was meant to have. This was the family I was meant to build. A wife who loved me without conditions. A home that was warm, stable, filled with love. A future I could actually believe in. And Lauren? She never got that second chance. She tried dating, but it never lasted. Nobody wanted to commit to a woman whose past was a mess of regrets and bad decisions. People don't want to build a life with someone who proved they couldn't be trusted. Over the years, I still heard about her. She never moved out of her small apartment. She worked a mediocre job, the kind of thing she never would have settled for before. No friends, no real relationships, just a half-life spent looking backward. One day, Rachel ran into her at the grocery store. "Nick," she told me later, shaking her head, "she looks like a ghost." "What do you mean?" I asked, even though I already knew. Like someone who never moved on. Like she's still waiting for something, someone, to fix what she broke. Rachel hesitated before adding, "She asked about you." I sighed. What did she say? Just, if you were happy. I let that sink in. The woman who once thought she was too young for the life we had, who thought she was missing out, who threw it all away for a cheap thrill, now sat alone, years later, wondering if I was happy. And the truth? I was. Happier than I had ever been. Lauren had spent years chasing freedom, thinking she was missing out on something better. But in the end, all she found was loneliness. She had everything, and she threw it away for a fantasy that never existed. And now the life she used to have, the family, the love, the security, belonged to someone else. She didn't just lose me. She lost everything. One night, Emily and I were on the back porch, watching our daughter play in the yard. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, the air warm, filled with laughter. Emily leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder. "You ever think about her?" she asked softly. I looked at her, my wife, the woman who had given me everything Lauren had thrown away. The woman who had stood by me, who had never once made me question my worth. "No," I said, meaning it. And I never did again. Years turned into a decade. Life moved forward. My life moved forward. Lauren's, however, remained frozen in the past, weighed down by the choices she could never undo. I didn't think about her often. Maybe once in a while, when someone brought her up, or when I caught a glimpse of something that reminded me of our old life. But there was no longing, no regret. Just a distant memory of a woman I used to know. Emily and I built something real. Something solid. Our daughter Sophie was growing up fast. She had my eyes, but Emily's heart. Jake finished college and was carving out his own path, already more successful than I ever expected. And Lauren? She stayed exactly where she had left herself. Still in that same small apartment, still alone. I never heard of her dating anyone seriously. A few men came and went, but nothing lasted. She had been a wife once, a mother, a woman with a life filled with love and security. Now, she was just someone with regret. It was by accident. A random Tuesday afternoon. I had stopped at a coffee shop, grabbing a quick drink before heading home. As I waited for my order, I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Nick." I turned. There she was. Lauren. For a second, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked different. Older, obviously, but not just in the way time ages a person. There was something else. Something in the way she held herself, in the way her smile barely reached her eyes. Like she had been carrying something heavy for far too long. "Wow," she said, letting out a soft, nervous laugh. "I can't believe it's really you." I nodded. "Lauren." We stood there in an awkward silence for a moment. I wasn't sure what to say. I didn't feel anything. No anger, no sadness, no nostalgia. Just nothing. "You look good," she said finally. "You too." It was a lie, but it felt like the polite thing to say. Her eyes darted to my hand, to the wedding band on my finger. I saw the flicker of pain, the quick inhale, the way she swallowed hard. "You got married again." It wasn't a question. "Yeah." She nodded slowly, forcing a small smile. "I heard." "Emily, right?" "Yeah," I said again, not offering more.